Welcome to the 5th episode of Women Just Like You, a podcast full of advice for women in the middle of their careers, directly from women who are in the middle of theirs. I'm your host, Audrey the Career Woman, a fellow mid-career woman, and we are so lucky to have Ashley Madrigal with us on the show today. She spent 7 years in human resources and has held several roles within the profession and is always hungry to learn more. Ashley and I met during an Employee Resource Group Leadership Summit and sat on a panel together where we shared the impact our ERG involvement has had on our careers. Hint, it's huge. On the episode today, we'll hear how Ashley made choices to expand her career in HR, how she stood her ground to the CFO of a company, how she brings mindfulness into her everyday, and how she's actively navigating unemployment right now. She was impacted by the tech layoffs that happened a few months ago and has lots of advice for folks who may be in the exact same situation today. I'm so inspired by Ashley's story, so get ready to listen to how a first-gen Latina has navigated the tech world. Alrighty, gals, let's buckle up and dive into it. All right, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you. I think our listeners are going to get so much out of your story.
And I'm so excited to be here. So thank you so much, Audrey.
The feeling is mutual. So let's just dive right in. I love to start these conversations off with a fun question that gets to kind of the heart of who you are as a professional and kind of your career to date. So when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so it was very specific. I knew that I wanted to be a pediatrician from like kindergarten. I don't know how I just came about this, but I just knew that I wanted to help people and that I wanted to help kids. And so for all of my kindergarten year, I would draw like ambulances with the red crosses and then my face at the front. So maybe I confused pediatrician for an ambulance driver, but it was pediatrician.
Oh, that's so great. Was there anything that kind of inspired that desire?
Honestly, I just wanted to help people. I didn't really know where that came from. I think I had maybe positive experiences with doctors, but I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to save kids. And yeah. And even when I got to college, I think I still had that mentality that I wanted to be a doctor. And I was going to major in biology. It was going to be a thing. And then I took my first biology class and I was like, yeah, this is not it. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. So that dream was crushed freshman year of college.
Yeah, I hear you. I went into college wanting to be a nurse. And so I was looking to be a bio-psych double major and had to work my little behind off to scrape by with B's. And all my econ classes came so easily to me. So I was like, okay, I think this is a sign from the universe. I need to switch.
Yes.
So I think freshman year bio kicked a lot of people when they were down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was one of them. So here we go.
So I love to hear that kind of story of like you wanting to help people. You had really positive experiences with doctors when you were a kid. One other question that I would love to ask you before we kind of dive into your career is another experience you had when you were younger before college. We talked in our planning conversation about your time in high school as a student on scholarship. So I'd love a story from you about how that experience was like. What was it like being a high achieving Latina growing up in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, of course. So since I could remember, I would say excelling in school and education and doing my best was huge. And I think it's because my parents were immigrants to this country. And so they instilled, like, if you want to become somebody, you have to do good in school. And so since I was little, that was just ingrained in me. And in regards to my high school, I think it was like a testament. I had worked my butt off middle school where I got accepted into a college prep high school in Atherton. It was a very affluent school. And as a scholarship kid, I was very much aware of the socioeconomic status differences whether it just was very apparent. I went to school in Redwood City, not knocking on my middle school. It was great. And I had so much fun. And maybe I was, excelling in middle school education, but private school was just a whole other ballpark.
Yeah.
And also, too, navigating within a prominent white institution was very different for me. All my life, I had a good mix of kids from different backgrounds my whole life, from kindergarten until eighth grade. And so I experienced some culture shock, definitely, and experienced some hardship, I would say. It was a little bit difficult. I know that I had shared with you, I struggled as a freshman with my math classes. And one of my math teachers told me, hey, like, I know you're doing a lot of, you're meeting with me, you're asking a lot of questions. That's great. However, I think it's, you should consider, going to a different school. I think it's not the right fit for you here. And as a 14-year-old, this could be very crushing. My whole life I had excelled, and then having a teacher, an educator tell you, hey, like, you're not really good enough for here. You're not cutting it, sweetie. And I remember going home and telling my dad and saying, this is what the teacher told me. And my confidence plummeted. And I remember, even as my father, I mean, he didn't graduate high school. He didn't go to college, but he was very resourceful. And he said, don't worry about it, Mika, which means my daughter, like, we're going to figure it out. I got tutoring, and I was determined to prove the haters wrong throughout my educational experience in high school. And I did. And it was through my dad's determination and his help and him believing in me that, I would say, saved me, and also the other teachers that also believed in me, that said, oh, no, don't worry about this person. You're going to do good, and we'll give you the tools and resources to excel.
I love to hear that story of kind of grit and resourcefulness, of not letting the haters get you down, literally.
Yeah,
I'm very thankful for you sharing that experience, because I don't think it's a perspective that is shared a lot. And, education is seen as a means to kind of make a great life for yourself. And scholarships are a way to help people do that. And obviously, look at where you are today and the successful career you've had to date. And I'd love to hear the determination of your father really pushing you, like, you can do this. Like, don't worry about it. We're going to figure it out. We're going to buckle down. We're going to get it done. I love to hear that support from your parents, even when you have other adults in your life as a child who are telling 14-year-olds that you're not cut out for this. Like, what are these educators doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's also very telling that what your words, what you say as an adult to a child, it can be impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And it can determine where you go in life. I know with me, I remember being so sad and feeling depressed. I didn't know what depression was, but I remember, like, I just felt, I'm dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying those negative words about myself, until I started to tell my mind, no, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You are very smart, you are very intelligent, and you will get through this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it made me be aware of the power of words.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's a lesson you've taken with you at all stages of your life ever since that experience.
All stages, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ashley. I really appreciate your vulnerability for our listeners, because that's just super inspirational so far. So I would love super quick summary. Tell us a little bit about your career to date.
Yeah, so I can start off how I started. I would say I started off in recruiting, which is great. A lot of folks start there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember graduating college.
Me too.
I do not know what I want to do. And I remember graduating college and saying, I don't want to do law school. I was a, poli-sci major, and I just, okay, but I need to work. And so I got this opportunity. And to be very, very honest, I did not know what a recruiting coordinator was at all. I just walked in and I had some experience working for the business college at my former college as like a front desk person, customer service. And that job gave me the experience for recruiting coordination. And I remember I didn't have the experience, but I had the personality. And I remember my ex-boss who said, "You know what? I'm going to give you a chance. I think you'll do really well. You have great customer, service experience, and I think you'll do really well." And that's how it started. I started as recruiting coordination, then I got into university recruiting, and then I was just very hungry to learn more. What is HR and how many avenues are there? There was HR business partners, there was compensation, there was, so many people operations. It was a whole new world, and I was just hungry. And from there, I just started to network myself. Like I was just like, hey, what do you do? Hey, if there's any openings, please think of me. And that's just kind of how I pivoted from recruiting to people operations and then to immigration. So it was just advocating for myself, asking questions, and wanting to learn.
Mhm. It feels like you are a very resourceful person. Just so far in these conversations we're having, something comes up and you're like, I can take advantage of that. Like, let's see how I can think about the best way to use this.
And honestly, I think it comes from how I grew up. Like, you have to grind. My parents couldn't help me with my college applications. I had to learn or talk to a college counselor or go to, you know, search something up online, watch a YouTube. Like, I had to learn a lot of things by myself. And even in my personal life, going to doctor's appointments with my parents, speaking for them, or, taking phone calls. And so from a young age, I had to ask questions and
Mhm.
I had to remember important dates. And so I think from that, it taught me how to advocate for myself. And also, I've learned that that's what everybody does too. It's like you're your own brand there. Like nobody is going to look
Mhm.
out for you besides yourself. And that's
Mhm.
also how the real world is.
Mhm. Yeah, I love to hear that you're supporting your family in such an intimate way, having to answer phone calls and kind of speak for your family at appointments when you were younger. I'm already so inspired, Ashley. And we're like just barely scratching the surface here. One thing I'd love to touch on a little bit, what you just mentioned, trying to navigate college and the application process kind of on your own. And again, going back to the resourcefulness, figuring out what resources were available to you so that you could apply to college and kind of get in. When you were graduating and looking for that first job, you mentioned you didn't want to go to law school, you were a poli-sci major, you ended up as a recruiting coordinator. What was it like looking for that first job as a first generation college student?
To be very honest, it was a very easy experience.
Mhm.
I think when I graduated college, I was very burnt out.
Mhm.
And so, literally, the day that I graduated college, the same day I was on a flight to DC because I had an internship. And so, after that internship, I was living at the time in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I was in limbo. I had applied to a fellowship in DC. I had applied to some jobs in Salt Lake City, and California is my hometown. And so I really was between three states. And I prayed about it. I was like, what is going to be the correct path? And I really pondered upon it, and I brought me back home, back to California. And at the time, I just really wanted to soak up my time with family, that I was just okay with not working because I had been in school since I was in kindergarten. And then afterwards, I was like, all right, girl, you need a job. And then I just did a job agency. One of my friends had found a job through a job agency. And so it was as easy as I went to the job agency, they found me a job, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's a company called Ring Central." And I was like, "All right, cool." My first interview ever outside of college, and I was hired on the spot. And so obviously that doesn't ever happen but it did
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And from that, it just catapulted me into this career within HR and within the immigration space. And I've always said this: I may not know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. And the only way you learn what you don't want to do is by trying different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that whether it's recruiting, whether it's coordination, whether it's university recruiting or ops or, immigration or global mobility, or even being an executive assistant. I was an executive assistant for like 3 months randomly because the CFO was like, "Hey, I want you to be my interim executive assistant." And I was like, I've never been an executive assistant. So I feel like just being thrown into these situations have, I would say, it really prompted fast growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm very thankful for everything. I feel like everything is, it's a lesson and it leads you to where you're meant to be.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm just going to say I love that to everything that you say, because it is so great to kind of hear. Also, I've never heard of anyone getting hired on the spot these days. So kudos to you.
It was back in 2016, so it's not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah. But also hearing that, being able to grow fast because of trying so many different things. I think a lot of people can sometimes get stuck doing one thing for a while. And you've obviously, done a bunch of different things, even within just Ring Central when you were first starting out. And getting access to the CFO as a executive assistant for a couple of months, like what a great experience. Did that kind of help spur a switch from that recruiting, university recruiter coordination world into the immigration and mobility space?
Yeah, so during my time, I supported the CFO and the CSO. And so it was something where at the time I was doing coordination for executive marketing and executive finance. And so I was already within that space and kind of like known for being on top of it, being on top of, coordination, changes, being quick on my feet. So I kind of had that reputation. And I felt, and to be very frank, it was a very challenging role.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in a completely different building. I didn't know anybody. And it was just like, do this, do this, do this. And I remember my first interaction with the CFO. I'm not going to say names, but granted, they're no longer there. We were supposed to meet and he missed the meeting because he got dragged into, something important. And he kind of walked by the desk and was like, "Oh, you're so and so." And I'm like, "Oh, hi, like I'll be supporting you during the interim." And I remember him asking, "Oh, can you get me a cup of coffee?" And my response was, "Would you give me a cup of coffee?"
Oh, what was his response?
He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I'm actually going there right now. Would you like one?" And I said, "No, I'm good, thank you." But it was because of that, I feel like we had such an understanding. And I remember, even granted, I was at the bottom. This is a CFO. And I remember too him thinking like I was an EA. So calling me, I was like, "Hey, you can call me between this time and this time. These are my hours and I will be yours. And if not, just text me and I'll get to it. I see everything, but this is my boundaries." And I think because we had that understanding, we worked really well to the point where even at the end of the 3 months, he offered me that job.
Good for you.
And I had to respectfully decline. And I learned so much. I learned time management, and he taught me really valuable thing that I still, I would say, hold close to my heart is your yes is just as important as your no.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say no to something, it is because you are prioritizing something else. And being a yes person isn't always the best thing. Like, it's okay to say no. Say no to meetings, say no to people, and also somebody else's emergency is not particularly my emergency. And
Mm-hmm.
there's ways that you can obviously say that without sounding, negative. And so that's one thing that I learned is learning how to say no.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to just capture that. Your no is just as important as your yes. So for all our listeners, repeat
Yes.
that that it's so critical. I've slowly been learning the boundaries thing.
Yes, your no is just as important as your yes. They both hold equal value.
Hmm. I so great. Such a good takeaway.
Hashtag stand on business. That's the new hashtag that's
Okay,
going on.
well,
Standing on business.
we'll put it in the show notes for everyone. Make
Yes.
sure you copy paste it. So you've made a pivot within a company a couple of times.
Yes.
What advice would you give to people looking to kind of make that pivot? You obviously had some really great connections at Ring Central that helped facilitate a move. So what advice would you give to people who might be in a similar situation today?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. And I know we hear that often, but literally, don't be afraid to ask questions. I remember being on team calls and being like, what's a KPI? I remember even asking, what's an ERG? What's an MBO? Like, I don't know what this means. It was a whole lingo. Within tech, there's lingos. And I would like search things up, but then I would want to make sure what
Mm-hmm.
these things, meant. And so I would say ask questions, be curious, and also like network within your company. You are your
Mm-hmm.
own brand. I know that for me, when I wanted to get into the DEI space, we had our first diversity and inclusion business partner just start. I set up 15 minutes with them. And I was like, hey, my name is Ashley. I'm very interested in what you're doing. I want to, know about how you got to where you are. And it was just like a quick 15-minute lunch. They told me about their educational experience, how they pivoted throughout their career, and where they are now. And I remember being inspired
Mm-hmm.
by my colleague and just being curious. And I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe that's something I can do. And for a long time, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be in DEI. And, for whatever reason, I was excelling in being in people operations and being in immigration. And then I thought to myself, wait, I can have both things. I
Yeah.
can be an ERG lead.
Mm-hmm.
I can, run employee resource group, and I can still get a little bit of both. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is how I viewed it. And I was very involved to the point where when we were hiring somebody for DEI, I was on the panel as an interviewer. And that was very neat. I was still in the space
Mm-hmm.
without having the title. And I think that's something where you and I both resonate
Yeah.
is it's like your passion project within
Mm-hmm.
work, but then it becomes your identity as well.
Yeah.
And it can complement what you're currently doing for
Mm-hmm.
the company.
Mm-hmm. You've obviously built your brand as a really, you're really on top of things. You've got a really good passion for HR work, and the fact that you were able to use those little conversations with different people at your organization to land on the interview panel for that full-time role. Like that just is a testament to the impact that ERGs can have on careers. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. Like what other experiences did you get because of your involvement in the DEI space? Kind of what role has your ERG involvement had in your career progression?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say the first was learning about equal pay day.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you learn about it, throughout college and whatnot, but like, what does it actually mean? Do I know how to advocate for myself? Am I being fairly compensated? So utilizing, things as pay scale,
Mm-hmm.
Glassdoor, or even having conversations with your colleagues. I know it's kind of taboo, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
how much do you make? But it's only in those spaces where you figure out if you are being fairly compensated and doing your research outside of your company and your area. So that's something that I really learned how to market myself. Obviously, it's within your experience, but it's also like what you bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
your worth. In
Mm-hmm.
addition to the years of experience, it's also your worth that you also factor into how you're compensated. And I would have these conversations and I'm like, I'm not being fairly compensated at all. I
What were their
started
reactions?
Well, I would just say it like that and they're like, "Oh, well there's things to do." And I think it's because I started within the company and I grew with them for almost 5.5 years. When I first started, my role as a recruiting coordinator to then, becoming, an immigration and global mobility specialist, you can't really jump that high once you've been with the company for that long.
Mm-hmm.
And there's differences. Lateral moves and
Mm-hmm.
promotions are completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a pay structure that comes with that. And so I recall like advocating for myself every time, whether it was annual review or mid review, I was always advocating. And I was like, this is what I believe that I should be compensated.
Mm-hmm.
And even with title as well, as a HR coordinator, I was doing immigration work. And I remember they were kind of like going through, the company was going through some tough times. They're like, well, we cannot increase you. You know,
Yeah.
I know you're doing this work. I was like, okay, well, what you can do is you can change my title though.
Mm-hmm. How was
Because
their reaction to that?
honestly, they're like, well, I don't know. We'll see what I can do. And then my title changed.
Oh, look at what happens when you make an ask, right?
And so I was like, okay. And I was very conscious. I was like, I know money's not everything. I had been with the company for, quite a few years. And I knew that I was like, I'm getting to that point where I'm outgrowing my current roles and responsibilities. So at that time, it was important for me to have a title change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it definitely paid off because that's what got me to my next gig,
Mm-hmm.
as a senior generalist. And so I think that's the biggest thing is you need to advocate for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not just in your professional life, but in your personal life. Nobody knows what you do. Nobody feels what you feel.
Yeah.
And if you don't ask, well, that's like somebody telling you no already.
Mm-hmm. The answer is always no if you never make the ask. But if you make the ask, it's sometimes a yes, right?
Yes. And then it's like, great, we're in business.
So you just mentioned that making the ask, getting that title change helped make the next role possible as a senior generalist. What were some factors that you took into consideration when you were looking to move companies?
Yeah. So when I was looking to move companies, again, it always, I feel like my career has always, it's so transformative. I remember I got a LinkedIn email and
Mm-hmm.
I never read my LinkedIn email messages. And I was like, oh, this seems like a cool company. Like, oh, it's a startup. Like, oh, and I
Mm-hmm.
started to research. I researched the company. I researched how much they're worth. I researched the board. How does the board look like? What's the mission? What are the values? And then the next important thing is, do they have an existing ERG?
Mm.
And that's actually a prerequisite of mine.
Is it?
It is. And so when I was interviewing at the end of the question, I said, "Oh, does your company have any ERG groups and what does the company do to help foster a diverse environment and how do you best support your ERGs?"
Mm-hmm. Did they
And
did they have one?
they did.
Cool.
They sure did, and they kinda said, like, "Oh, these are the events that we do," like, "Oh, there's definitely some need here, there's some need there," but to me, the fact that there was something existing and even for the companies that, don't have an ERG, that's totally fine because you can always go and build. I would say and I did have one interview, I would say, a few weeks ago, and I had asked that same question, and I had had some friends that had worked at the company and they didn't have ERGs. I was like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I could, but I did some digging and it was like they did have ERGs and then they dismantled the ERGs and didn't think it was
Mm.
that important. I was just like, that's a no for me.
Yeah. That reminds me when Twitter had all their, or
Yes.
I guess X now,
Yes.
had all of their stuff going on and they dismantled a lot of their groups. That made me really sad to see.
Yeah. And so company culture is huge for
Mhm.
me. And I do my own digging. Like if I have a former colleague that used to work there, or just even having candid conversations with the hiring manager, how their experiences, do they feel welcome within the office space? How is it? Do people say hi to each other? Those things are important because it's your
Mhm.
environment, it's your work environment. And we spent what 40 plus hours working. And so it's very important to me. The company's values on inclusivity and how they best support their employees.
Hmm. And you're at a very interesting point in your
Yeah.
career talking
Yes.
about like what you consider when you're moving companies, because you were actually laid off in the fall a couple of months ago.
Hmm.
And you, in our prep call, you mentioned the benefit of getting laid off because you have the time to and the ability to pause and reflect on what you've been doing to date. And so I'd love to kind of hear how you're approaching this time between jobs and kind of what advice you might give to people who are navigating their own layoffs. We've seen, a bunch more get announced in the last couple of weeks.
Definitely. And that's a wonderful question. I first want to acknowledge that I'm coming from a place of privilege
Hmm.
because I do have the luxury to pause.
Hmm.
I've been, I think, coming up on 5 months, which is insane to me to think that it's been that long because I have taken this time to pause, to reflect on my contributions with my past company, to look at the things that I accomplished, to look at the areas where I could have improved on, and also just to let my body relax. And I've taken this time to really travel. I've taken time to do solo travel. I've taken time to do a lot of somatic practices like breath work and mindfulness. And also, I'm currently working on becoming a mind and body life coach
Cool.
as just something that I'm passionate about. I started a secondary Instagram page, which is all about mindfulness and, yeah, just somatic practices. And that's something that makes me happy. And
Hmm.
so during this time, that's what I've been doing. And so again, just acknowledging that I have the luxury to do so.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I also have some resources that I've done is like LinkedIn Learning.
Hmm.
So much. Have learned so much from LinkedIn Learning and networking. So reaching out to former colleagues, making new connections, literally researching like, who do I want to be? Let's
Hmm.
become friends, you know? And also, getting new skills during this time, getting certified. What skills do I have? How can I improve? And where am I doing good and where can I, excel? And
Hmm.
so that's been, again, one of the best experiences I've had is just taking a pause because I don't remember the last time that I ever had this pause.
Hmm.
And it has been necessary for me because last year was a very hard year in my personal life where I just had the time to really just reflect and be like, you're doing it, girl. You are doing it. And it's okay to let your body rest. It's okay to calm your nervous system and take your mental health and your physical body and to heal it.
Hmm.
And that's what I've been doing. And granted, I know that growing up, my folks didn't have that luxury. And of course, they needed it. But they had kids. They needed to work. They needed to just hustle and grind because they had to feed their
Hmm.
kids.
Hmm.
And so for me, I'm just very thankful to have this time to just re energize myself and then just to get myself more hungry and excited for finding a new job that complements me
Hmm.
and a company that I believe in and that I feel confident representing.
What are some things that you're thinking about as you're looking for that next role? It sounds like you have had the chance to heal a little bit from 2023. So, what are some of those components you're thinking about? Obviously, if a company has an ERG, it sounds like that's a really important piece. But what else?
Yeah, another thing is can I grow within this company? What are the career opportunities?
Hmm.
Is the team small? Are they big? Are they looking to expand? What are the company's values? What is their mission? What do they really believe in? It's not just finding a job. I know that with my folks, you just get a job and like you just have to work. Like, oh, you got a job? Like the first offer, yeah, just take it. I'm like, yeah, but I have the power to choose now.
Mhm.
I don't just have to take any job. I want to take a job that I resonate with.
Mhm.
And also the team, the manager. Manager connection is huge. Often you hear people don't, I mean, granted, people leave companies for a lot of reasons,
Yeah.
but a lot of times people leave companies because of their managers.
Mhm.
Is the manager a micromanager?
Yeah.
Are they a good leader? Are they a multiplier?
Mhm.
Are they a
Yeah.
diminisher? What
Mhm.
what is their managing style? And so that's something that I ask too. It's like, what is your managing style? What do you expect of your team? How often do you like to meet with, your team? Is it weekly? Is it bi-weekly?
Mhm.
And so those types of questions help me gauge how I'm going to interact and what my expectations will be. When I'm first starting off, I say, within the first 1 month to 3 months or 1 to 2 months, like, yeah, definitely weekly calls. And then the cadence can change to biweekly. Biweekly is, sufficient for me. I'm not somebody, I don't particularly enjoy being micromanaged. If you'd like to see what I'm doing, I have my own self tracker, and at any point we can, you can ping me. That's great. I don't really do emails, but I best do, Slack. Or if the other person does emails, I'm like, oh, that's great. So you're learning how to
Mhm.
communicate,
Mhm.
set up expectations, and yeah, don't make assumptions. That's what I always say.
Mhm. Ask the questions. Seems like that's a very big
Ask the question.
theme in your life and career. Like, ask the questions. And also to remember that taking a job is a two-way street. Even if they think you're a great fit for the opportunity, like, you also still have to evaluate if it's the right opportunity for you. And I love to hear your perspective on, like, having a little bit of privilege to kind of sit in those decisions and make that choice. Is this the right choice for me? So I appreciate that perspective. How will you know when you've found the right fit? You mentioned you just had an interview recently. How would you know when you've gotten through the end of an interview process? Hopefully, you have an offer on the table. How do you know that you found the right fit?
Yeah, so I would say, well, number one, you need to align with the company, their mission and their vision.
Mhm.
A huge two is being fairly compensated. Like, knowing your worth is so important, not
Mhm.
just professionally, but personally as well. What is your worth? What is the lowest? What is the highest that you are willing to go? So being fairly compensated is huge. And also employee benefits. I have
Mhm.
been very thankful and I would say blessed, because tech spoils their employees. There's so many amazing
Yeah.
benefits, employee benefits, that I have loved or I have discovered, new organizations or apps through my company. So things such as like Calm or
Mhm.
BetterHelp,
Mhm.
or having quarterly stipends to just spend it on getting, a desk, things that a company does to make their employees feel valued. So employee benefits are very huge. And also, things such as 401k. Does your company match?
Mhm.
How much do you have to pay for benefits? Like, I thought, oh yeah, it's normal to pay $20 for insurance. Yeah, like that's great. And then when you don't have insurance, it's like, oh, it's like hundreds of dollars,
Yeah.
And so it's just things like that you can take for granted. And I think by being laid off, I was like, whoa, there was a lot of benefits that I definitely took for granted. And at the same time, it is something that I seek for in companies is
Mhm.
employee benefits. And also, again, ERGs are very huge as
Mhm.
well. And whether or not I'm able to build and grow within a company, that's also very huge for me.
Mhm. So it sounds like inclusivity, the opportunity for growth, and a company that treats its employees well, treats their employees as people, and gives them the benefit that they need to be a successful person, not just a successful employee.
Absolutely. And the snacks are great too. I love
We all love free snacks.
We love the free snacks. Snacks are great, and a great incentive. But yeah, I would say that's very huge. And also, too, it's how do you know whether it's a right decision? I think I've always been trusting that whatever happens in life, whether it is a rejection, it's always a redirection. A rejection is a redirection, and you just have to trust that you are exactly where you are meant to be.
Mhm.
Exactly. So whether you're with the company for 1 month or 5 years, it's valuable time. And
Mhm.
there's always growth and opportunity. It's all in just how you look at a situation. Know that you're always in alignment.
I love that. It sounds like you've obviously done a lot of deep work. You've started a secondary Instagram to kind of talk to this mindfulness piece of life, and I can really see it coming through in a lot of your answers, just how important it is to be connected to yourself. And I'm sure it's really helped you navigate these last several months.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just and everybody please regulate your nervous systems. I promise at home, your friends, your family, your colleagues are gonna, just appreciate it because often, we're not taught how to navigate hard situations in the
Mhm.
workplace or when we're feeling stressed or when we're feeling angry. And
Mhm.
so knowing tools to kind of help calm you, it makes you be, I would say, a well-rounded employee.
Mhm. Well, we'll include your Instagram handle in the show notes so that if
Oh,
people need a little bit of help to kind of figure out what that best practice is for them, we can send them to your page and you can give us all of the tips. I definitely need it myself.
awesome. Sounds good.
So we're getting kind of close to the end of our conversation. So I just have a couple of questions left for you, Ashley. I'm really intrigued to kind of hear about to start off this last part of our interview today. What has your experience been like in tech as a Latina? You've talked a lot about ERGs, finding that DEI efforts are really important to you. What has that experience been like in general?
It's been very positive, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's been positive because my mindset has been so.
Mm-hmm.
And I, representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, if I can do it, so can you.
Mm-hmm.
Being authentic, bringing your full self to work, not being embarrassed, has been very huge. And like I said, I have had such positive experiences. Also being within HR, like I was like, oh, I'm the only Latina here. Huh. Hey, I think we should work on hiring. And so just
Mm-hmm.
being in spaces where you can advocate for others has been very huge. And especially in HR, I think there's always a notion like, oh, HR is a place where you go and die. That's what I heard. Somebody's like, oh, HR is a place where you go and die. I'm like, HR is fun. I always ask people like, oh, do you know who your HR business partner is? Like, no, I just go and talk to you. And I was like, no, this, they can help you with this. They can help you with this. It's not just when something bad happens, like they can help coach you. And so just being a resource has been, really helpful. My experience being Latina in tech, it's been awesome just speaking Spanish as well.
Yeah.
I love speaking Spanish. And when I swear I speak Spanglish sometimes. I mean, granted, I speak English when I'm like in calls or whatnot, but just whenever I would see somebody like at work that's like visiting or, you know, they're doing like services like for the company, like I'll speak Spanish. I'm like, oh, you speak Spanish? I'm like, oh yeah, I do. And then I just create a rapport and then like a friendship with people. And I've even had folks that say it's like, oh, like my daughter or my son wants to get in this tech space. Do you mind if I, send them your information? And I was like, oh, I would love that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kind of like within networking, like just because like I'm a Latina woman, like if I can do it, you can too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just been my experience. It's been very, very, very positive, and I've been very blessed. And also just creating space and making room. Like, yes, I am here and deal with it.
I love that. What would you imagine your career is going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? You've obviously made a big impact in the people around you, in the tech space, in HR, bringing your authentic self to work all the time. What do you kind of imagine your career is going to look like?
That's a wonderful question. I believe that if I continue in the trajectory that I'm in, I would hope I would be like a business partner, like an HR business partner. That'd be wonderful. because I love helping people, and you're
Mhm.
also a liaison between the business and the employees. And so you're the in between. You can coach managers on how to be managers, and you can coach employees, right? And you can still help facilitate hard conversations and also advise the business. And so I think that's something that'd be very ideal. And also, I anticipate that my side hustle and my passions are going to, I'm just going to be my own person and my own brand. I
Mhm.
really believe that I will have a business, whether it's in somatic work or whether that's me speaking at companies about mindfulness. That's just what I see. I feel like I can't, like my day-to-day job, it's wonderful, but I need more. And so I
Mhm.
anticipate I'm going to have my own business as well.
Well, I'm here for it. I will gladly hire you one day to come be a speaker at whatever company I hopefully own in the future. So you and I
Yes.
right there will be owners together. Um,
Yes.
what advice would you give to women who are in the middle of their careers right now? Would it be creating a side hustle that, in a couple of years might turn into their full-time gig? Is it taking a pause? Kind of what advice would you give to women in similar situations?
Yeah, so I think it's different for everybody. I'm always going to recommend a reflection period
Mm,
to dig deep into yourself. Who are you? What do you want for your life? And you are, I always say this, you are the love of your life first.
mm,
What does Ashley need? What does Audrey need to be
mhm,
fulfilled? And so to really just, whether it's journaling, whether it's breath work, whether it's just talking aloud with, people that you trust, I would say that do a little pause. And then also always keep learning. So
mhm,
get certified. If there's something that you would like to learn how to do, or something, or a skill set that you would like to learn, Coursera is great. There's
mhm,
so many, you can get so many credentials. There's eCornell. There's just so many resources where you can continue to learn that will complement your current career. Or if you're wanting to pivot to get a credential in something else, even if it is DI or if it's, UX, UI, it could be
mhm.
something completely different. Starting as an intern somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, starting over, if you have the time and if you have the luxury to do so, like,
Mhm,
do that. And I would also say to, like, discover what your passion is. And if your job is your passion, then great. But if not, then maybe kind of on the side, just kind of figure out what that means, because your passion is your
mhm,
spark as a person. And I believe that when you have that spark, or when you have that inkling, it's for a reason. And a lot of us ignore it, because life is life. But I would just pay attention to that spark. Where is it? And can it illuminate and blossom into something?
mhm. I love that. That's such a great piece of advice that I hope people rewind to the beginning of that question and listen to it a second time. Thank you for that, Ashley. So, to close us out, I would love to hear some inspirational quote or saying that really resonates with you.
Yeah, so I have a few. The
Mhm.
first one that's the top of my head is in Spanish, and it's something that my Latino folks, y'all are gonna know this, but it's called "Ponte las pilas," and a literal translation is "Put your batteries on." Put your batteries on. So it's kind of
We're
like
all
weird.
gonna be Iron Man.
We're all the Iron Man, but what it essentially means is like, come on, let's go. You can do it. Ponte las pilas. And that's something that I've always heard since I was a little kid until now. So say if I was like struggling with something and I call my dad, oh, I'm struggling or I'm having this issue at work. And he's like, okay, well, you know what you have to do. Ponte las pilas. And I'm like, oh, like whenever I hear it, I'd be like, okay. And it was even to a point where I had a sticky note at my desk that said,
Yeah.
Ponte las pilas, meaning, girl, you got it. You got it. And your dad's voice is right there. Put your
Mhm.
batteries on and charge. You got it. And the second one is from my favorite author. His name is Don Miguel Ruiz, who is the author of The Four Agreements. And the Four Agreements are very simple. You can apply them in your personal life and in your professional life, which is: don't take things personally, Don't make assumptions. Be impeccable with your word and always do your best. Your best will change from time to time. So always give yourself grace. So those would be the 4 agreements. I highly recommend that book. If you haven't read it, please read it.
We'll drop it in the show notes to make sure everyone can learn
The 4
about the 4
agreements.
agreements. Cool. Thank you, Ashley, so much. There are so many great pieces of advice in here. Your story, I'm sure, is so similar to a lot of people who are looking to find that spark, what you're talking about, having the ability to take a pause. It sounds like you've gone from, a pediatrician wanting to help kids when you were a kid to hoping to be an HR business partner to continue to help people in the future. And it's just really inspiring to see how you've been, a young Latina in tech, really creating your path, connecting your roots to who you are, and using that battery pack to kind of power you forward into hopefully what is the rest of a very fruitful career. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. I feel very blessed and honored, and I just want to take this time to express my gratitude to you, and I'm excited to see where this is going to unravel for you. I think this is great, and you're doing wonderful work. So I'm like, all the vibes and all the blessings going to you. You're going to be amazing, and you are amazing.
Thanks, Ashley. Take care.
All right, thank you.
Wow, what a woman. If you liked this episode, please share this conversation with the fabulous gal pals in your life, because there's so many women out there who could benefit from Ashley's advice, where if you or a woman you know is navigating a layoff, she'll be sure to think, if she can do it, so can I, after listening to this interview. In the show notes, you can find links to the resources we talked about in the interview, ways to connect with both me, Audrey the Career Woman, and our guest Ashley, and a link to sign up for exclusive insights into the making of each episode and monthly career development recommendations. And one more thing, we are officially halfway through season 1 of Women Just Like You. I've gotten a ton of positive feedback from the audience, and I'm so glad this show has helped so many of you. If you have enjoyed the podcast so far, I'd love it if you shared it with your networks. Follow me on Instagram at Audrey the Career Woman and tag me in your social posts. Please give the podcast 5 stars and like, subscribe, rate, and follow so you don't miss a future episode and so that other women just like you can benefit from the show too. See you next Wednesday for another episode of the podcast, where we'll hear about the differences working in the US and India as we talk to a woman who is thriving in the revenue operations world. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in this week to my conversation with Ashley on Women Just Like You. See you on air soon, gals. Bye.